Have you ever really, truly stopped to think about where money comes from? I'm not talking about the coins jingling in your pocket or the bills in your wallet. I mean the vast, vast majority of it, the digital numbers sitting in our bank accounts. Well, the answer is way more surprising and actually a lot simpler than you might think. And it all goes back to a story from long ago, a secret that was kept by a humble town goldsmith. Let's dig in and uncover it together.
So, for real, where does it all come from? Now, if your first thought is the government, or maybe a giant printing press, well, you're not wrong, but you're only seeing a teeny tiny piece of the puzzle. The truth is, most of the money in our modern world is actually created every single day by regular commercial banks. And to understand how on earth that works, we need to rewind the clock and start with a simple story about a craftsman.
Okay, picture this. A long, long time ago, in a town with no banks, you had a trusted goldsmith. Now, people had these heavy, clunky gold coins, and they needed a safe place to keep them. Who's got the strongest vaults in town? The goldsmith, of course. He was the most logical, most trusted guy for the job. And that simple act, just storing gold for people, well, that laid the foundation for our entire modern financial system.
Here's how it all went down. First, the townsfolk would drop off their gold with the goldsmith. In return, he'd hand them a paper receipt, basically an IOU, a claim check for their gold. And pretty soon people figured out, hey, it's way easier to trade these light, convenient paper receipts than to lug around these heavy bags of gold coins. So the receipts themselves started to circulate just like money. But here's the crucial part. Every single one of those receipts was 100% backed by an equal amount of actual gold sitting in the vault.
Now, this system worked like a charm for a while. But then, one day, the goldsmith had an idea. An ingenious and frankly world-changing idea, and it all started with him just noticing a very simple pattern in human behavior. He realized that on any given day, almost all of the gold just sat there. It never moved. People were perfectly happy trading the paper receipts back and forth, and only a very small handful of people would ever come in to claim their actual gold. The rest, it was just collecting dust in his vault, and right there, that's where the magic trick begins.
The goldsmith thought to himself, why not lend out some of this gold that's just sitting here? But then he realized something even easier. He didn't even have to lend the gold, he could just issue new paper receipts that weren't backed by any new gold at all, and lend those out to people who needed a loan. He'd charge them interest, of course, and make a tidy profit. As long as everybody didn't rush in at the same time to claim their gold, nobody would ever be the wiser. He had effectively just created new money out of thin air.
And that brilliant, or maybe kind of terrifying idea has a modern name. It's called fractional reserve banking. This isn't some historical footnote. It is the fundamental engine of our entire global economy. You see, banks are only required to hold on to a tiny fraction of your deposit in reserve. They're free to lend out the rest. And here's the kicker. When they make that loan, they aren't lending you someone else's money. No, they are creating brand new money in the process.
So yeah, that little trick that was born on a goldsmith's workbench, it didn't just fade away. It grew up, it evolved, it became the blueprint for the whole shebang, our entire modern financial system. And its core principle, it's still exactly the same.
The parallels are they're direct. The goldsmith is now your bank down the street. The gold deposits, that's your paycheck hitting your account. And those handy paper receipts, they're the digital numbers that pop up on your banking app. When a bank gives someone a mortgage for a house, they don't just reach into a vault and pull out another saver's money. They just type new digital money into existence. Poof.
Okay, so let's see how this creates a ripple effect. Imagine you deposit $100. The bank, by law, has to keep just 10 of those dollars in reserve, but it then loans out the other 90. Now, the person who borrowed that $90 probably deposits it into their bank. What does that second bank do? It keeps 10%, $9, and loans out the remaining 81. This cycle just keeps going and going, with each loan creating a new deposit, effectively turning that original $100 into a much, much larger amount of money flowing through the economy.
But look, creating money out of thin air, it's not a free lunch. It can't be, right? It has a very real, though often invisible, consequence that affects every single one of us. And that consequence has a name we all know: inflation.
The logic here is actually pretty simple. Every time a bank makes a new loan, the total supply of money in the economy goes up. But the amount of stuff we can buy, the cars, the houses, the groceries, that doesn't increase nearly as fast. So what you get is more and more money chasing the same amount of goods and services. And what does that do? It naturally pushes prices up.
Here's what's so crucial to understand. This process makes every single dollar or pound or euro that you've already worked for and saved worth just a little bit less. It's basically a tax, but it's one that nobody ever votes on. It just silently eats away at the value of your savings and your paycheck, and you never even see a line item for it.
Let's make this really tangible. Let's say a year ago, you could walk into a grocery store with a $100 bill, and you could fill your shopping cart right up to the top.
Well, today, that very same $100 bill might only buy you what $97 could get you last year. A few items are suddenly missing from your cart. That difference, that loss in your real-world buying power, that's inflation in action.
Okay, so this leads us to what might be the most profound part of this whole story. Because virtually all money is created as a loan. That means it's also created as debt. And that debt always comes with interest, which, well, that creates a kind of mathematical puzzle that our entire economy is built on.
Here's the core of the problem. When a bank creates, say, $100,000 for a loan, it creates the principal. That's the money the borrower gets. But it never creates the extra money that's needed to pay the interest on that loan. So where does that money for the interest come from? Well, it has to be borrowed into existence through even more loans. This means the system as a whole requires a constantly expanding supply of money, and therefore a constantly expanding mountain of debt just to keep from collapsing on itself.
And so there it is. The goldsmith's secret is out. Our modern money isn't really backed by gold in a vault anymore. It's created from debt. Now, this system has fueled some absolutely incredible growth and innovation for sure, but it also locks us into a cycle of ever-expanding debt and this steady erosion of our purchasing power. And it forces us to ask a really fundamental question. If the money in our bank accounts is basically an IOU born from loans, what then truly creates lasting value in our world?